The ridiculous NCAA witch hunt has led to a coach being fired in Stillwater. Mike Gundy has opened up about the Bryan Nardo defensive experiment last season, and all of those OU fans complaining about how Oklahoma State simply paying their way into this recruiting class might actually have something to complain about, and it's quite refreshing.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at Aldeo State. Today, we're brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment matter more, especially right now when new customers can win $150 back in bonus bets. If your first $5 hauler is a winner, head on over to FanDuel.com to get squared away with all of your betting needs today. Speaking of betting, if you're betting on Oklahoma State, you need to continue to do so. The Cowboys have more capabilities than I think all of us thought physically possible. Oklahoma State has had a lot of success recently in the recruiting realm, and I think when you look at the transfer portal, we've also had a significant amount of success there. So much so, it sparked intrigue throughout the course of the offseason, mainly when guys like Chendavian Bradley, former five-star All-American, goes to Tennessee, doesn't put on enough weight, goes to Hutchinson Community College, wins a national championship, and then we land him within like 48 hours. How is that possible? How do you get somebody like Brian McCoy, who had several SEC offers coming out of Akron with a 5th to 7th round draft grade? How are you able to get somebody like that? J.K. Johnson coming from LSU, Mordecai McDaniel, formerly of Florida. How is Oklahoma State able to obtain the services of ththese individuals? Bob Schick from Virginia Tech. And now it makes more sense. In this new rev share era, the players are all signing their new contracts this week, and a lot of things have come out of that. Whenever you have conversations with some of the players that have transferred in regards to what they were previously making in NIL, what they were supposed to make if they would have made it through the fall portion of the season, and what they're making at their new school, combined with what some of the players are making now, Oklahoma State has way, way, way more money than I thought physically possible. I can tell you this. We've got several players that have never taken a snap in Boone Pickens Stadium. They're already getting paid pretty much Ollie Gordon money. So this idea that Oklahoma State is now being able to compete with the OUs of the world in recruiting, it's not just because the staff is so good. They're not just phenomenal at identification of talent. They're not just phenomenal at building relationships. We do have the monetary side of this equation to convince people to come to Oklahoma State in a matter of hours. So like somebody like Chendavian Bradley, if you win a national championship, you put on the weight that Tennessee said you're having difficulty getting to, you're naturally going to be sought after by the Auburns of the world and the Bamas of the world and the Mizzous of the world, which traditionally have had way more NIL money than Oklahoma State. Yet somehow we're able to land those guys in a matter of hours from offering. That was something in the offseason that was obviously extremely intriguing. How are we getting these dudes that have a ton of Big Ten and SEC offers very quickly? Well, it's because our NIL dollar bills are a lot more beneficial than we have led on previously. Now, I don't know if we had a difficult time coming up with the NIL, right? Obviously, Ollie Gordon took a little bit of negotiation, and he also wanted to make sure his offensive line got paid, and that was kind of the barometer for the success in Oklahoma State. The idea was if you come to Oklahoma State and you rock the world, you win a Doak Walker Award, you're worth almost $1 million. And if you want to divvy some of that up to your offensive linemen, so be it. So let's say Ollie Gordon's at $800,000, which seems to be a pretty common place numerically. Then it's pretty crazy to me that we have several individuals that have never played yet in Stillwater that are already getting close to that. Not quite that, but close to that. And Mike Gundy kind of accidentally slipped up, in my opinion, in a Big 12 Media Days interview, which we're about to get to a little bit more of. He said that we bought Haas Haney in here. He obviously meant to say we brought Haas Haney in here. But this is yet another conversational piece that we know good and daggone well that teams all across the country wanted Haas Haney, primarily because of his ability with his legs to come in and kind of give the defense a little bit of a different look. So the suitors were going to be there. And financially speaking, we thought that Ollie Gordon kind of set the bar for what players are going to make. That seems to be pretty abstract at the moment, because the amount of players that are getting close to Ollie money is pretty surprising. the amount of second and third teamers that are getting $10,000 to $15,000 a month. It's extremely surprising. We've got guys on this roster that are currently going through like the injury protocol that aren't even 100% released yet. They might not even necessarily play this season, yet they're still getting that same range. So, of course, they're going out and buying cars and having these conversations and learning fiscal responsibility. That's another thing that I think this new NIL era is going to be beneficial towards Oklahoma State. You guys notice we did bring in John Perrin, former Oklahoma State pitcher, to give like a financial guru session to the Oklahoma State football team. Since then, we've had a couple more individuals come in that weren't publicly announced, but they were doing the same thing, essentially breaking down the finances and the taxes that you have to pay and the taxes that you can potentially get around paying for monetary purposes. And all of that is to say we have not a ton, okay, but we have more than enough NIL capabilities. When we have linebackers and safeties that are coming into Oklahoma State and making $500,000 plus, that's pretty remarkable. And it also, to me, shows that Oklahoma State has been willing to do some things that we weren't previously willing to do. We talked the other day or yesterday about how there was portions of Mike Gundy's career where he would literally give part of the recruiting budget back to Mike Holder and say, I didn't need all this. And Mike Holder would say, dude, I'm not here for you to budget. I'm here for you to use it so we can capitalize. This is a capitalization season for Mike Gundy in Oklahoma State. And I think this is yet another indication that we're going to be more than fine. The days of us getting out recruited constantly by the Ohio States and the Alabamas and the Georgias and the OUs of the world are not exactly gone, right? Because they still do have more money than we do. But a couple years ago, we announced that we paid like $2.7 million in NIL. This previous season, it was released that we spent somewhere around the 5 range. And if you just do simple math, okay, and let's say that nobody on the team is making more than $150K. And I do know that there's some third stringers right now making $150, $155K for this upcoming season. If you stretch that across 105 dudes, that's like $15 million, right? So I think even at baseline, we're doing significantly better than we ever thought physically possible. And that's the thing is we've been kind of sneaky in our finances. There was something put out, whether it was like a year and a half ago, that Oklahoma State was like 13th, 15th place in the Big 12 when it came to spending money and recruiting, budgeting, and things of that nature. And the number was really low. And Mike Gundy even came out and said, well, we don't have to show things that other universities do. Like we don't have to pay for the same kind of flights and hotels and luxury items that other visits have to do because we utilize our own hotels. We utilize our own airplanes, our own helicopters. So Oklahoma State doesn't have to pay for United flights or Southwest flight or whatever the case may be. They don't have to put them up in the Marriott and the King Suites. They can do all of that on campus with the Atherton Hotel and some of the other private capabilities we have in flying planes and whatnot. So the number that was put out publicly, even Mike Gundy said that's a little misleading because there's portions of the recruiting budget that we don't necessarily need like other universities do. So they prop that up as this is part of their budget, right? To go to a TCU or something to that effect. You have to pay for the flights. You have to pay for the fancy hotels. You have to pay for the rental car, transportation, and the family, which Oklahoma State does as well, but it is different because we have a lot of that on campus, which also gives more of that family atmospheric feel that we're looking to accomplish whenever we're going through a recruiting sales pitch. Oklahoma State's NIL collective is fine. There's a reason that we're landing the Danny Bills and the Taj Overtons of the world over Georgia and Oklahoma and Tennessee and Oregon. It is because we have more NIL money than we're physically disclosing. Now, why is that? I don't know what the case would be for why we're not explaining it, but the money that these players are getting is way more than last year. And way more than I think any of us thought was ever going to be possible in Stillwater. Naturally, the concerts have been absolutely massive, but another portion of this is just other donors stepping up, right? There's a power vacuum at Oklahoma State. People want to be the next Boone without spending Boone-level money, yet other donors have kind of stepped up to the plate. So it seems as though that there's a buy-in from not only Mike Gundy and the coaching staff, but there's donors and other people at the highest levels that are more than willing to help Oklahoma State put in the resources necessary to keep them in the upper echelon. The days of us having an LSU or an OU swoop in at the last minute and offer them more money than we could physically even fathom, those days are done. We are currently paying this roster at a ridiculous level. I would argue that we're going to be at the top end of NIL payments this season. Are we going to approach Texas Tech money? No, we're not. But we're going to be spending more than most everybody in the league, and this is one of the best kept secrets. People always talk about the sleeping giants. UCF is going to be a sleeping giant. That's why they needed to be in the Big 12. The SMU, it's a sleeping giant with old money just ready to be spent. That's why they need to get in the ACC. Oklahoma State seems to be a sleeping giant as well. Whether it's the concerts, whether it's other donors, whether it's the Boone Pickens foundational allocation money, whatever the case is, Oklahoma State is spending significant amounts of money, which is why we're in the running for a lot of these top recruits in the country. This is why we've been able to go get transfers from the LSUs and the Floridas of the world, is precisely because of the staff, because of the relationships. We just landed Brandon Ford from Kansas State, and I have heard that after he committed to Kansas State, it was basically no conversation. So as soon as they got his commitment, they really stopped talking to him, which is precisely what allowed the door to reopen for Oklahoma State. And the Cowboy coaches were all over it, giving him direction, giving him pointers, giving him advice, and also telling him how they could see this transcending into his commitment at Oklahoma State. And that led to us getting Brandon Ford. So it's not just about the money. It's about the relationships. It's about the training. It's about the coaching. It's about the system. But it's also about the finances. Oklahoma State had to be competitive enough to be at the forefront of the recruiting conversations. Clearly, that has happened. Oklahoma State does have those capabilities right here, right now, and it looks phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. You know what else is absolutely phenomenal? If you guessed FanDuel, you guessed right. FanDuel is the bee's knees for all of your betting needs, and it's about to be that season. This is the time to hammer the over with all of the doubts circling around Oklahoma State country. When it comes to football, this is an opportunity for all of us to capitalize on our monetary gains. Summer sports are now in full swing. So whether you're about to go to the baseball stadium or you're going to go hit the golf links or you're going to go take on some soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it even more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach or doing whatever ridiculousness they're off doing. FanDuel makes tracking your favorite matchups easier, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions that always make the betting fun. It is easy to use, fast payouts, and the regular season just becomes more eventful if you've got some skin in the game. Whether you're placing a same-game parlay or watching the bet ride all the way into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you're part of the action. If you're new to FanDuel, that's awesome because new customers can currently bet $5 and get $150 back in bonus bets if that first $5 hauler is a winner. Make sure that you open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started with the best in the betting industry. This is the bee's knees for all of your betting needs. Now we get to shift gears about Mike Gundy in this Big 12 Media Days. He obviously had an interview, and we're going to break down portions of that over the next episode or two. But I wanted to hit the portion where he was talking about Bryan Nardo because I've gone on the show, I've been on X, and I've discussed how a large portion of the difficulties on defense this previous season were not Bryan Nardo's doing, and he got kind of squeezed out of the way. And thankfully, Mike Gundy came out and essentially said the same. He admitted that this last season wasn't Bryan Nardo's fault because he changed the defense. Mike Gundy, one of the defense changed so much so that it kind of took away Bryan Nardo's capabilities. And whenever you start doing that and you start relegating somebody who's supposed to be the defensive coordinator to primarily coaching positions, it does make it more difficult, especially when it comes to making checks and balancing out the roster. If you're not comfortable with the scheme and it's not the scheme that you brought in or designed or helped build, then you're naturally going to be kind of lost at times. So it was amazing to hear Mike Gundy say that, right? There's been some things that we've discussed on the show that have been validated by Mike Gundy, which I'm obviously very appreciative of. And this is probably the biggest one of all time, is the fact that Bryan Nardo got screwed. Bryan Nardo was hired to run a system, knowing, right? I've had several conversations with Bryan Nardo, and he knew that there was going to be a little bit of a hold your hand kind of approach whenever he came to Stillwater. He was going to utilize the coaches like Coach Duffy and Coach Hammerschmidt and Coach Joe Bob that have been here for years. He was going to have to lean on them to kind of implement the system that he wanted to, but also sticking with some of the things that we've done previously. It was supposed to be an emergence of the Bryan Nardo 3-3-5 system that is comparable to ACOG's system at Iowa State and some of the stuff that we've done previously. Now, there's a discrepancy on the 3 down front and the 4 down front, which caused Greg Richmond to get fired essentially from Oklahoma State. It caused Paul Randolph to have absolutely no success whatsoever this previous season. It caused a lot of turmoil essentially, and Bryan Nardo was the one that was catching all of the heat for it. Like, I had conversations with Nardo in the middle of the season about how things didn't add up and things didn't make sense. And it was because he was being handcuffed. He was being told, I want you to shelf what we brought you here for, and I want you to go with this. And then we're going to bring in Kevin Steele to help you with the installation of what this 4 down front should look like, combined with your defense. And, of course, Joe Bob had a major hand in the decision-making process that went through the entire defense. He basically bet his house and his career on Kendall Daniels and some things working out that just clearly were not working. So even Bryan Nardo, that was catching all of this flack and all of this heat, he could see that this physically doesn't make sense. This is not going to work. This is not going to go well because we don't have the right personnel to do it. Yet none of that really mattered at the end of the day because we felt like a change needed to happen a few weeks into the season. And that really hamstrung Bryan Nardo. Bryan Nardo also had defensive coordinator offers in like the MAC conference that he had to turn down because comparable to Oklahoma State, there was some language, there was some verbiage being said about how, hey, we want you to come in and bring your 3-3-5 system, but you have to be open to changing it, which is precisely what he did when he came to Oklahoma State. We're going to hire you. We like your youthful exuberance. We like your recruiting abilities to get into living rooms, but you're going to have to be malleable. And he said, okay, I get it. This is a big step up for me going from lower levels to big-time Big 12 football. So he knew that some guidance was going to be necessary, and he had to be somewhat malleable on the things that he was willing to adjust on. But that all got thrown out the window, not quite in the middle of the season, but pretty close, the front half of the season. So I feel bad. I have felt bad for a long time that Bryan Nardo was catching so many stray bullets for things that he unfortunately had no control over. There was other coaches that had a bigger voice than Bryan Nardo, and for whatever reason, those other voices were listened to, primarily because they'd been here for years and years and years. So I kind of get it, but it was a handcuffing moment for Bryan Nardo. So when he got that MAC offer to be a DC, I was like, that's natural. You're going to take it. And he's like, I don't know. I don't know if I should, because I do not want to get in a predicament once again where I have something that I wholeheartedly believe in if the personnel is right, yet I'm being asked once again to possibly be willing to change it. He didn't want to do that, so he took a position coach with Charlotte. And I think that's a smart move. Bryan Nardo is not done with his system because he has proven that it can work. It can work to remarkable levels if he has the right guys in place. If he doesn't have the right guys in place, or they athletically don't have those dudes to make it work, then it does put him in a slightly precarious position. But I have respect for Bryan Nardo sticking to his guns here and saying, you know what? I gave some concessions to take the Oklahoma State job, and it ended up derailing my career, essentially. So my next stop, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just be a position coach. I'm going to work my way back up into being a DC where I can coach my system the way that I want to with the guys that I think can run it. I think it's a beautiful move. And I think it's even more beautiful that Mike Gundy was willing to step up and say this. There has been some things over the years that we've kept silent about, right? There's been some coaches being let go, or some coaches leaving, or some players transferring, or some players not playing X, Y, or Z. And we're usually pretty tight-lipped about it. So I think this is a huge move by Mike Gundy to have Bryan Nardo's back here and explain to people that what happened in this previous season's defense was not Bryan Nardo's fault. At the end of the day, he was on paper still the defense coordinator, right? So it is going to fall on his shoulders. But he was hamstrung, and he didn't really have enough say for defensive coordinator. That's another reason I'm pretty excited about this season, is Mike Gundy did a complete 180 in that department. Instead of bringing in a gym from like a D2 or a D3 that he could work and mold to be here for years and years and years, instead of doing that, we went out and got a head coach of the defense. That's precisely what Todd Grantham is, and you're seeing that. Part of this allure for Todd Grantham likely would have had to been this NIL conversation. So now that we're spending ridiculous amounts of money that I thought it would be a decade from now before we're spending this kind of money, but we are. We're in the mix of it. We're in the trenches. We're paying big boy money to garner some of the best talent in the country. And we have a defense coordinator that I would imagine had this discussion before he took the job, right? There's no way Todd Grantham says, hey, I'm coming to be the defense coordinator. I have to bring these 7 coaches with me, and you can do whatever you want with NIL. There's no way. Clearly, part of the negotiation to get the services of Todd Grantham was, what does your NIL picture look like? What are you willing to spend? What are you willing to go up to? If Oklahoma State would have said, hey, we're going to try to stick at $5 million in recruiting, Todd Grantham would have said, sorry, love you later. There's no way Todd Grantham would have accepted this job with a $5 million NIL budget. He knows from his time at Florida and Mississippi State and in the NFL, he knows financially what it's going to take to be competitive. Once again, this idea that Oklahoma State's going to have another bad season is ridiculous. I love the fact that Mike Gundy's being more open, upfront, and transparent about what went down with Bryan Nardo. But it also, to me, accentuates why we hired Todd Grantham. It also validates this NIL money that we're hearing is being passed around now. It's primarily because this new staff had to have had conversations about what the budget is. What is the NIL budget in Stillwater, Oklahoma? Because if it's not going to be a certain number, there's no way I can be successful here. And I'm sure Todd Grantham had that conversation. I'm sure Bryan Nardo would have loved to have had the ability to have that conversation. So this is an exciting time, in my personal opinion, for Cowboy football because of the expectations. The standards are 7 wins, right? To me, that is the absolute basement standard for Oklahoma State football, thanks to Mike Gundy. And now that we have this NIL money, and now that we have this defensive staff that is recruiting to SEC levels, there's nothing that says Oklahoma State cannot be the upper echelon of all of this. Everyone's talking about the spending at Texas Tech, which is astronomical money. Like, they're spending Texas A&M, Miami, Mizzou money. They are. But come to find out, we're not very far behind that. And Bryan Nardo, I think, gets a little bit of a boost here from Mike Gundy publicly explaining to people that I kind of cut the legs out from Bryan Nardo. And it's not his fault that the defense ended up the way that it was. Because the defense wasn't great in the beginning, but I feel like it was very evident that when we started tinkering with stuff around week 4, week 5, that's when things got kind of crazy. And that's when we started seeing some of our most talented athletes, like a Kendall Daniels, stop giving the same level of effort or stop being at the right place at the right time. Things got crazy because nobody had control. That's all it was. So kudos to Mike Gundy for this one. Kudos to Mike Gundy for accepting this new NIL era and understanding that to go get these SEC and NFL coaches, this NIL conversation is going to be a part of it. We're not going to garner coaches like that if we're going to stay at this very minuscule number. So I'm glad this stuff's shaking out. Not so happy about this NCAA. It's ridiculous is what it is. The NCAA witch hunt has paid off, I guess, if you ask them. The NCAA obviously came down on Oklahoma State tennis coach Chris Young for the dumbest things I couldn't even imagine that they would do this, because the NCAA knows good and damn well that every team in the country is doing the exact same thing. When we talked about NIL earlier and how Oklahoma State now can compete with the Miamis and the Georgias and the Bamas of the world, we all know, because the players have discussed it, that the Ollie Gordons, the Nick Martins, the Kendall Daniels of the world, Corey Black, they were getting ridiculous money offers from Miami and Bama and Georgia and Mississippi State and Oregon during the course of the season Yet, is anything happening to them? No. We know that players at Oklahoma State and every other place in the country is calling their buddies at other schools and saying, you should come to Oklahoma State because of X, Y, or Z. And now that is being deemed as illegal recruiting. By the letter of the law, sure, Chris Young did some inappropriate things by contacting players a week before the transfer portal window opened, or this massive egregiousness of having players talk to other players about why Oklahoma State is the best fit for them. This is a preposterous thing, and I would rather sit on a cactus infected with syphilis than allow the NCAA to get this W, but this is precisely what we're doing. Now, I'll also try to be somewhat objective here and doing some digging and some pieces of conversation. There was an internal investigation that equaled some things that Oklahoma State just couldn't look past. So perhaps it's simply about this recruiting stuff. Perhaps it's the fact that he said, hey, don't say anything to the NCAA about you contacting these other players on our behalf. Maybe it's just that, but I feel like it's got to go deeper, because there's no way Chad Weiberg is going to fire a coach that just won an indoor national title not even a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, has a top 3 team that is competing for a national championship, both indoor and outdoor, this upcoming season. We wouldn't fire somebody like that if all he did was talk to a few players before the portal window opened and have his players talk to other players from other places. And some of this is even more ridiculous because we have a lot of international success when it comes to tennis recruiting. We have some players on this team that speak the native language of other players internationally that we're trying to recruit. So again, why would you not have that individual reach out to those players that speak the same language to help with the recruiting? It's just asinine that the NCAA is taking this position. And it's even more asinine that Chad Weiberg is essentially letting them win this battle unless something crazy was found out. Because again, if it's just this, what every single coach in the country, what every single player in the country across almost every sport in America is doing, this is ridiculous that the NCAA would come down on Oklahoma State, right? But they're going to allow all these other schools and these other coaches to have conversations with players during the season, knowing that it's happening, yet they're going to come after Oklahoma State tennis. And then Oklahoma State is going to in turn fire the dude because he did what every coach in the country is doing. So much so that I don't think that Chris Young should stop what he's doing. If Chris Young stopped contacting players before the transfer portal, if Chris Young stopped having his players talk to other players from other places and other countries, then we're going to suck. Like every team in the country is doing this exact thing every single day. That's what's so maddening. And I don't think that's tampering. I don't think that it's tampering if a player from Oklahoma State calls a dude from Colorado and says, you know what, you're an Okie, you grew up here, you grew up an hour down the road, you need to come back because Oklahoma State's doing some special things. We've hired some special talent. We're paying some special levels NIL money. You want that to happen. And yet, if Oklahoma State does it and it's a tennis coach, then the NCAA can pretend to have teeth once again and pop up and say, ha, we got you. You're on probation. Yet they're not going to go get Georgia, Bama, Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi State. They're not going to go get any of them for the exact same things. If there's more that we found that equaled him being fired, then so be it. But if it is just him being fired because of this NCAA bullcrap, then that's a weak look by Chad Weiberg and Oklahoma State University. We're cowing down to the NCAA. Once again, we're participating with their ridiculousness. When is Oklahoma State going to stand up to the NCAA? Because I think this is a bad look. Unless something crazy came out of the internal investigation, if all it is what the NCAA has suspended him for, then this is weak. It's not a good look. It's not a good move, and I do not like it. Anywho, all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here in Locked On Oklahoma State, because you could be anywhere. So happy you choose to be here. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you liked it. Dislike if you didn't. That's okay too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe. My podcast people out there, you are everything that makes this work. I appreciate what you do. So go do what you do. Hit the stars. Leave some reviews. Alrighty, y'all. Later, taters.